Hi. It's me, Brandon.
Hi, Brandon. You look great today. I think your computer is a little frozen.
Yeah, sorry about that. Just kidding. It's me!
This is the best intro I have ever been a part of in my whole life. You're not Brandon at all. You're Dr. Sarah Guttles. Welcome to 8 Bits, y'all. The podcast about tech and their lives and people. And see, normally Brandon does the intro, so he actually knows what to say. I'm new at this. My name is PJ Bits. With me this week, Dr. Sarah Guttles over here. Joining me as co-host because Brandon's feeling a little under the weather. There's some weather on top of him. And we wish him a speedy recovery and lots of rest. He's fine, but, sick.
Has he tried an umbrella?
Yeah, that weather, umbrellas will stop it.
Yeah.
I think that's honestly the way to go, is an umbrella. Or a raincoat. I mean, he lives in Northern California.
Many options.
Like, rain happens. Weather happens.
He should have been prepared.
Goodness. Yeah, like, we're blaming you now, Brandon.
Just kidding. I hope you feel better, Brandon.
No, yeah, we're both sad. I mean, like, I'm sad and all, but I get to hang out with you.
True. And I get to do something today. This is great.
How have you been? What's going on?
Oh, I've been great. I am taking a little break from full-timeness of careers to do some fun things, do my podcast with Chloe, get to kind of come on 8 Bits, maybe start a special project with PJ on scary movies and tech. It's going to be fun. Yeah, so just kind of hanging out and being a mom. Yeah, it's great.
It's fantastic.
How are you?
To be able to do stuff like that, to be able to take that time off and to,
yeah,
because you've been full-time working, constantly busy since 13 years old, since birth. Honestly.
Basically.
Honestly, I know. I feel like our families have similar dynamics where we both like just kind of started working young and just kept going.
Yep, it's true. It's true. So I'm really excited. I'm going to, appreciate this moment.
Heck yeah, good. You asked earlier how I'm doing. I'm good. I'm fine. We just started the new fiscal year at GitLab yesterday. So we are, and our organization is old. We're in fiscal year 23.
Yeah, because it ends in 2023. Yeah. When I was at GitHub, they did the same thing. It was February 1st, and it was FY23. It always confused everyone.
And honestly, because I'm on the education team, we also operate with the idea of semesters all the time. So we'll be like, oh, what's going on this semester? Oh, what's going on this quarter? Oh, what's going on this FY? And like, oh, it's confusing, but I'm smart. Confusing. I can do it.
You can do it. I believe in you. Yeah, in the chat, Rihanna suggests the umbrella too, and Riri's queen, so I agree. Like, should have known better.
Jelly man, you're my favorite person that comes in this stream all the time. You're so supportive of me. Everyone say hi to my sister. Awesome. Well, yeah, we do have a show today. You are our co-host. You're not our guest. You're
Correct.
Here to work, and we are paying you appropriately for that work. I assume.
Correct.
Assume Brandon got that check.
The check's coming in the mail, I think.
That's right, and it's a piece of paper that says thank you, and he signed it. He did the art. The
tracking number was 1, so I think it'll be easy to find.
That's right. But yeah, we have a great show today. We have a guest today who is very important in my life, because when I started this journey of getting into tech, I had 2 mentors. I had Brandon, I had Chloe, and both of them were giving me a lot of help with a lot of the things I needed to learn, things like Git, things like just the way work is done in the developer world. And this person on today was instrumental in me really starting to take seriously that I could work in tech and that I could be a part of tech. And I'm very, very excited to have her on the show today. And I'd like you all to please welcome Regina!
Woo! Hi, thanks so much for having me.
God, that's such a good sound. I have too many stupid sounds that I've downloaded from Stream Deck, and I don't get to use them enough. Regina,
You're like the
thank
radio
you.
DJ in Family Guy who plays all the sound effects.
It is honestly, my inspiration is terrible American 1980s radio DJs. And I think I'm doing pretty good at it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I appreciate that. Yeah. They never should have gotten me this Stream Deck. Reg, how are you doing?
I'm really well, thanks. Well, you've covered how you are. I'm very good, thanks.
Good. So there's people out there who don't know you, which I find hard to believe. But how about you tell us about yourself? A quick intro, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. So as PJ said, I'm Reg. My name is Regina, but everyone calls me Reg. I am American, even though you can't tell from the accent. I've been in the UK for about 11 years, I think. And I am a tech convert. So I started off my career in marketing, and now work in cybersecurity. So that's me.
Fantastic. So that tech convert, like you weren't in tech and then you switched to tech. I wasn't in tech and then I switched to tech. Dr. G, you weren't in tech and you switched to tech, right?
Yeah, I switched in college, so I think people don't often associate it with kind of a switch, but then I also didn't focus exclusively on tech. It was like tech and education. So yeah. But yeah, I didn't discover it until I took one class and I was like, what is this?
It's always exciting that one thing that like sort of flips the switch for you that makes you go, oh, that's neat. Reg, what was that for you? What was that thing that flipped the switch for you?
So I went to a security conference. So I was still working in tech because I worked for IT companies, but I was in marketing. So I was very hands off. I was not technical in the slightest. I was doing social media and, organizing events and stuff like that. So I wasn't doing the tech side of it. And so I went to a security conference to just try and get some more content, for blogs and stuff like that. And there were 4 speakers who spoke who kind of stuck in my head to this day. And it was just the idea of how much security touched everyone's lives and kind of the impact that security has on things. And so there was a journalist, he's called Jeff White, and he talked about some research that he did on different types of ransomware around the world. So we tend to think of ransomware as, being very generic across the board. And he talked about different attacks, and this is stuck in my head forever. He talked about this one basically in Japan, and it was how they changed the viruses based on the culture of the companies that they were attacking. So in Japanese culture, there's a lot of people who are very by the rules. It's very kind of formal, and it's, the kind of the inbuilt right and wrong is a very important thing. And so it was a pop-up that would come up on some porn sites that basically the attackers had kind of taken over. And so it didn't pop up and say that, we've got you on video and now we're going to hold you to ransom, or, it didn't. It just popped up and said that you're in an area which is for members only and you haven't paid to be here. And so you have to click this window, you have to click this and pay to be in this area because you've accessed this and you shouldn't be here. And that was it. It was literally just a pop-up window. It didn't do, all people needed to do was close it. It wouldn't affect their computer. It didn't encrypt their files. But the sense of like, I'm in a place I shouldn't be, they made loads of money from it. It worked. And that was just
fascinating.
The idea of the kind of personal side of security just hooked me. So here I am.
That's something amazing. The idea of like security being a cultural thing too, and how like different attacks come from different cultures. That's wild.
Yeah.
Dr. G, did you find it? Did you find this Japanese?
The Japanese porn site? No.
No. No, the story.
No, I was looking for a similar story that I recently heard about how these attackers were looking for people who were very like high up in their industry and inviting them to be on like a board of some sort. And what the hackers did was actually hack a university's server, like email server, and be able to send emails from the university. And they actually created like a page on the university's domain. So they were sending emails to the like high level professionals as this professor, getting them to sign up for this thing. And it, like, it all looked legit because the people that they were trying to hack were like people who would check domains and like not just click on random links. And so they did this whole convoluted thing. But Reg, actually, I wanted to ask you, because I know you said, you know, you were marketing, but none of the tech stuff. But every single marketing person I've worked with at technical companies is very technical. Like, and I don't mean they're writing code, because I don't think that's the only way of being technical. But the fact that you were at this security conference and the fact that you were looking for content, you understood kind of who the technical audience was, you understood what the company did, and were able to translate that. I think that that is more technical than what a lot of developers do, to be honest.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I've been pulled up on this before, and it's something I need to work on, is I need to stop saying that I'm not technical. There's a lot of things I can't do that are techie, but I am technically minded. And I think you're right. There's a huge element of people who are in marketing, and that was one of the reasons why I kind of got into security, is because I needed to understand, like, marketing is sales, right? And I need to understand what I was selling. And so I need to understand, who am I going to target with this? And I think bad marketing, you can still stay very removed from what you're selling. But good marketing, whether that's tech or cars or anything else, you have to understand who your audience is. You have to understand why they're interested in it. So you're right. That's a really good point. Yes, there was the technical understanding.
Yeah. And I feel like your, you know, skills in marketing and understanding, whether it's technical marketing or not, just understanding your audience and being able to deliver what would work for them. I bet those skills are huge in security, because that's kind of the whole point, right? Is being able to anticipate what you know, a victim of a hack, or you know, something might be, being able to anticipate the actions of the hacker. Like, you know, I'm just using hackers, but like, you know, I feel like that understanding of how people think and act is probably huge in your career now.
Yeah, it's come in handy so much. Whether you're trying to get a developer to understand why you need to do things in a certain way, whether you're trying to get your mum to understand how to do something, you know, it's still relating something, and you have to learn how to translate something in a way that makes people care about it. Because as much as I love security, I know that most people don't. And so I can be really excited about it, but if I don't know how to make it relevant to them, it's never going to land. It's never going to go anywhere. So yeah, it is marketing. And it took me a really long time when I was kind of moving across, and the amount of people who didn't get that, and to say that it's a transferable skill. And actually, you know, it is a really good thing for me to have this experience. There's so many people who don't see it like that.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to ask, like, I don't know the story of Reg and PJ. So I know, PJ, you had your career before that too, before what you're doing now in education. And like, you know, could y'all share a bit more about what Reg kind of shared with you? Because I feel like those skills prior to entering tech are so critical. And I agree, Reg. I feel like some people just don't get it. They're wrong. Quote me. But like, what can you tell me a bit more about that?
Oh, that's
PJ,
like,
do you want to go?
I think, I'll take a stab at it. So I was a teacher for 10 years before this. I wanted to be a high school English teacher. It's something I realized in my third year of college that was what I really wanted to do. And so that's just what I was going to do forever. It did amazing things for me. I became a really confident public speaker, and a lot of the skills I developed as a teacher really sharpened what is, I think, inappropriately called soft skills. I think that soft skills are interpersonal skills, and I think interpersonal skills are how we relate to each other, and all business is how you relate to each other. Everything is how you relate to other people. So I got really good at that. And when I was thinking of transferring, the first thing I think that really made me realize I could work in tech, because at first I was learning to code and I was like, oh, I can build a website or an app for my students that make me a better teacher. One of the first things that made me realize I could be that I could be in tech at all was Chloe reading a description of a DevRel job for Airtable, and actually posted that clip on Twitch a few days ago. But what Reg did specifically is Reg was the first person outside of my mentors who I felt like had to like me, like they had invested time in me, and they were like, well, PJ's got to succeed, and I'm going to make sure he succeeds, because otherwise, like, that looks bad for me. It's like the way it can write off compliments from your partner very easily sometimes. But
Yep.
Reg said, oh, I think you would probably be really good at this, and like sent me a position for her company and was like, I can put you in contact with someone. And the fact that a person who only saw what I had been sort of doing online, where I was like doing streams with Chloe and building Twitter bots and sort of that stuff, saw something in me. And
that's good enough for me. Like,
the Shania bot that's my application. Actually, I just send them a link to Shania bot and say, here it is. But yeah, this realization that my skills and what I had learned as an educator were not only useful in a new career, but desirable in an employee, completely changed the way I was thinking about my job search. And like I said, Reg was one of the first people outside of my mentors who was like, yeah, you can do this. Because even at home, I was constantly like, I don't know that I can do this. And my wife was like, I mean, are you going to be able to do this? I was like, I don't know. Like, this seems terrifying. But yeah, absolutely. And that's how Reg and I met. It was through Chloe, really. I think Chloe knew you. Y'all were like mutuals on Twitter.
Yeah, just on Twitter.
Yeah. Twitter really is real life.
Yes. All I did was send the link.
It meant the world to me at the time. I remember, actually, I was looking through our Twitter conversation that we had when you were reaching out to me, and you were like, do you have time today? I was like, oh, I'm babysitting a National English Honor Society meeting right now, but afterwards I can chat. And remembering that part of my job was like working with student groups, that the student groups really ran themselves, and I was just there as an adult in the room. So I had these times where I was just like, I would just let them kind of do work and make sure that they were like headed in the right direction. And there's value in I just love, I could talk teaching all day. There's days I miss it, but like other days I get to stream with two awesome people, and that's way cooler than talking about AP English.
So Reg, you said that you moved to the UK 11 years ago?
Yeah, I think so.
But you didn't have an accent prior to that? I'm so curious about that.
Born and raised in Colorado, so lived in the States my whole life, and then I met my boyfriend in the States, who's English, so I moved over, and I think, so I have a lot of friends who are American who have been here for longer than me, and they still have their accents like 100%. But Colorado's dead center in the US. It's a very neutral accent to begin with, so I didn't have like a Southern twang or like a Boston accent or anything like that. So I had a pretty neutral accent. But then when I moved here, I didn't work for an American company. I didn't move here with family. So I didn't hear an American accent, like unless it was my family at home. Everyone I lived with, everyone I worked with was English. And so it just kind of crept in. It was never like, I always felt, you know, the episode from Friends when Amanda comes back and everyone is like, oh God, Amanda, ring me on my mobile. I'm forever paranoid that I'm that person, like, you know, the person who like studies abroad and they come back and have an accent. I'm really nervous. But if I actually try and do a British accent, it sounds horrible. So I can 100% assure you that this isn't put on. But it's just like, I still say like banana and tomato, and like it's still there. It's just very weird now. I just sound like a mutt.
I get you though, because I'm Latina, and my mom and grandpa are from Uruguay in South America, and so they speak a very specific kind of dialect of Spanish. And then when I went to school, it was more of like a Spain Spanish, and I even had some teachers. I had some teachers that were Mexican and some that were from Spain. So then I would do like a teteo every once in a while, but I used like vos with my family, and then usted with like
Oh,
the
the
teachers.
vosotros.
Yeah.
And then when I got to high school, all of my friends were Mexican. And so my Spanish is just like so confusing. And I'm like you said, like I'm like a mutt of the Spanish language. And then I don't speak it every day, all day anymore. And so now I've got this like, I forget verbs. And so then it's like some English in there and it's just like a mess.
It's
I
it's
had
a
no idea.
UN accent.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I had no idea until I moved here and went to Spain for the first time how different Spain Spanish was. And my boyfriend, we were at dinner and he said, gracias. And I was like,
Yeah.
why have you got a lisp all of a sudden? And I just
Sure.
absolutely tore into him. And I was like, what are you doing? That's not how you pronounce it. And then the server said it. And I was like, oh, all right, different accents. All right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Because in
I think
Colorado, it's all Mexican Spanish. Like that's what my
Exactly.
mom's fluent in it. That's what I grew up learning. Spain
Yep.
Spanish is like, I don't
So
know what you're
different.
saying. It's completely different.
exactly.
Yeah.
I've
And
heard
South
that
American is different too. It's like a
Way
mixture.
different. I was in high school. My girlfriend for most of high school was Colombian, and my mother is Puerto Rican. And when our mothers would talk, it was like two completely different languages. Like my mom would use slang and have to
Yeah.
like, oh wait, what's the real word for that? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
I got in
Jellyman
so
said,
much trouble for saying carro instead of
"Carro."
automobile.
Aren't there the TikToks that are like when you're Spanish in the Spanish class? Like if you're a Latino in Spanish class, they're like, "¿Cómo se dice car?" And the kid's like, "Carro." They're like, "Incorrecto." And the white kid goes, "Se dice el coche." And he's like,
Yeah.
"Correcto." And it's like,
See, and my grandpa was like, no, it's automobile.
I've heard that an accent, like falling into an accent from people around you, is related to empathy. And like my sister and I are the same. Like I'll start pulling in accent when I'm around people, and my brain is always like, "Don't do it. They're gonna think you're making fun of them. Be careful." But
Yeah.
an accent can be really important to being understood when you're in a
Yep.
new place. When I was in Korea for a year and a half, I had to learn to say loan words with with a Korean accent, which made me feel terrible. The first
Right.
time I tried to order a hamburger over there, the way you order things is you say the noun of what you want, and then you say "juseo," which means "give me, please." So, hamburger juseo means "please give me a hamburger." So I went to it. It was like my second month there. I went to a what's called a lotteria, which is a fast food place that does burgers, and I said, "Cheeseburger juseo." And the guy looked at me. He was terrified, and I was like, "Oh no, I said it wrong." And I was like, "Cheeseburger juseo." And he was like looking around for the person that spoke English, and I was like, "Okay, just look at the menu and read because I could read the Korean." And so I looked at the menu, I found it, and I went, "Cheeseburger juseo." And he went, "Oh, cheeseburger." And I was like, "No." And that's when I realized if it's a loan word, especially saying it with the accent actually helps make you understood better.
That's so fascinating. I also
Yeah.
like my husband can tell who I'm talking to on the phone depending on how I'm speaking. Like my voice, like my just everything about how I speak changes depending on which friend I'm talking to, and it's not conscious. I can now notice it, but it's not conscious at all.
I just went back to Colorado a couple of weeks ago, and I was there for 10 days. And while I was there, I could hear me becoming more American when I was there again.
So
and it's crept back. I think it's back to whatever my accent is normally now. But while I was there, I could hear me pronouncing stuff, and I was like, "Oh, I don't normally say it like that. Like, where's that come from?" So it's definitely crept back in.
That's so interesting.
Reg, when this total career change, like you moved into security from marketing, that happened 2 years ago. You said a year and a half ago.
Yeah, a year and a half.
So, what is something? We talked earlier about how important our former careers can be as far as skills related to a new career. What's something you think you brought with you from marketing to securities that you wouldn't have known otherwise?
Um,
I put you on the spot. This is a
I
big one,
know.
actually.
Um,
As I was asking this question, I was like, "This is a lot."
so I think similar to what we talked about earlier in terms of the ability to kind of understand your target audience and to be able to kind of frame things in a way that they need to understand it or that will hook their interest. I think that bit of it is super important. Um, but I think probably more practically, being the marketing side of things, I had a huge amount of exposure to different vendors and different companies and how they position themselves. And now kind of being the other side of it in terms of like the buyer, the user of the tech, it's been really nice to kind of have that understanding to say, oh, actually, I know a company who kind of positions themselves in this way, or I know a company who offers that. Um, because when you're this side, there's so many, there's so many companies and there's new security companies that are starting up all the time, and they all have a slightly different, niche that they fit in.
A
And
very
so,
hyper specific thing, yeah.
yeah, exactly. And so it's kind of like you just can't see because there's so many companies. Whereas the fact that I've been the other side and I know, I spent my job was to understand their positioning and to understand their selling points and do competitor analysis. And, my job was to research these companies. And so to be the other side of that, I think that's really helped me kind of understand what a good kind of security tech stack I would want to build or want to use.
I think it's so fascinating because I feel like too often people who started out as devs and are still devs and didn't have like a different career interest forget that they're a part of a business in a larger capitalistic ecosystem. And so I've often had conversations where it's like, yes, I understand that tiny feature might be technologically interesting, but that's not going to sell. And it's not that everything needs to sell, but it does. Like, we work for a company that is part
Right.
of it. I think like understanding how to position things to customers, but then also back to the rest of the team, right? Like, that was always part of my job as like an engineering manager was saying like, I understand that you're interested in this. How can we just like show the benefit to customers and then weigh whether our effort is worth that amount of benefit, right?
Yeah.
And being able to frame it like that. And so I feel like that's a really good kind of, I don't know, just perspective. And we had a question in the chat for you two mostly, but do you feel like you would be successful in your current career, your current position, if you hadn't had your experiences in marketing or in teaching?
I absolutely wouldn't be.
I mean, I disagree with that. I know I don't know you super. I think you would be. You obviously have the inclination for it, and you have those skills aren't learned. That's something inside of you that you're very good at teaching, that you're very passionate about things. I think, yes, I probably would be successful, but I'd probably be a dickhead. Like, I think I would be one of those people. And there are security people who think that they do run the business and they think that everything is the security is the most important thing. And you lose sight of what else is out there if you've only ever done one thing. And not to say that people who have had one career path their whole lives are all dickheads, because someone will hear me say that and go, "Oh, thanks a lot, Reg."
Clarification. We don't mean you.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it absolutely helps contribute to success to kind of be able to see things from another side.
Mm-hmm. I agree that, like, certainly I could say, oh, I would find a way to be successful. I believe that, like, what I do is something I not that I always could have done it, but my personality is a big part of why I'm doing well right now.
Yeah.
I think. But I think about very specific things like classroom management and preparing lesson plans and considering things like, well, what do I want them to learn by the end of, or more importantly, what do I want them to be able to do by the end of this? And because I did 10 years of thinking like that, that's ingrained when I create a workshop or even just a presentation. What do I want them to be able to do at the end of this is just the thought I have while I'm working now. So I think of like the specific skills I picked up as a teacher. And I know for me that those skills are what I'm leaning on right now to do well at this job right now.
Yeah.
But I agree with you that like, and I agree with you too, Sarah, the person who is kind of like hyper focused on their job will often overinflate the importance of their specific work. And it's important to recognize you're part of an ecosystem. You know, your finger is super important and it allows you to grab things and it allows you to gesture and allows you to do a lot, but it is a part of a body and that body is a part of a person. And we need to understand that when you're on a team, it is all in service of a single goal, and whatever you're doing to achieve that goal, it has to work.
Yep.
Yeah. There was one thing I learned. So they said it to me on my first day at my company in our induction was basically, we find ways to say yes. So security, our job is to say yes to things. Our job is to find a way to say yes. And that is completely counter to almost everything that I learned kind of when I was self-studying in security and trying to skill up. It was, you know, security should lock things down and security shouldn't allow that. And then to come to a company where they went, look, we want to allow things. We want to say yes to things. It's a completely different mindset, but the attitude and the way, the relationship that we have with the rest of the business, the respect that we have within the business and the weight that that kind of carries, that we are listened to. And, you know, if we do say no to something, they know that it's a very serious no because we don't do it often. And it's really important, I think, to understand, again, especially I've definitely worked places where security teams are business blockers. And, you know, if you work for a security company, that's fine. Security can be the most important thing, but it's not our job to run the business. It's our job to facilitate business safely. You know, it's not our show. And I think I think I'd lost sight of that self-studying. I think it's very easy to think of security as an all-encompassing thing. And that's super important. And that's one thing I mentor a group of kind of career changers. And that's one thing I always try and enforce to them is it's super important to just remember that it's very rare that you're going to be in the position where you get to call the shots. Like it's not security's place to do that.
And that idea of security being about saying yes, and I think that's a really fresh way of looking at it. Security really is about making sure that the right people, tools, actors, whatever, have access when they need it. And it's not about blocking everyone out because then we could just pour concrete walls over things and be like, that's it.
Exactly.
But good security is about letting the right people in, not just keeping the bad people out. That's fantastic. Yeah. Your company sounds dope.
I think it's a good point too, because it's like the idea of like, I feel like I would trust a security team thinking more of trying to say yes, because it's the idea of being able to eventually prevent things that you're not expecting, right? So it's kind of like going with the assumption, like I've always hated when I worked with other developers and they wanted to go with the assumption that people were going to use the technology correctly. Right. And so I always approached it because my mom, you know, just retired from teaching and she was the most technologically advanced teacher on her school site. And no, I love her, but no, like, and so, you know, I would always approach things from that perspective. Like you have to understand that there are entire ecosystems and employees who literally don't understand how email works literally say, my password's not working because they're using their email password to unlock their Facebook, like, and so I would always try to approach technology as like, how do we make sure that people can't do the wrong thing? And it's not the can't, it's like, how do we assume that they're going to try to do the wrong thing, and then we protect them from that, right? And it sounds like that's more of what your company is thinking about, like, how do we assume anything can happen and still ensure protection, beyond that?
Yeah, it's have you seen that the video of, I think it's a TikTok of a UX designer, and kind of watching someone put the holes, the like wooden
the shapes, and they're like, and what is this
yes,
shape going to?
yes,
That's right,
yeah.
the square.
It's exactly like that. Like, you can put best effort into designing something properly, but people will do what they've always done and what they know how to do. And if they're allowed to do it, they'll do it. And there's a really big, there's a huge trade-off between trust and security, right? So it's, you don't want to alienate people too much by saying, look, we don't trust you. At some point, if you've hired them, if they have a job, you have to trust them. But at the same time, there are people who are corrupt. There are people who will, who can be tempted to sell something from a company, whatever. And so it's always this balance, and, you won't always get it right. Like, some things will happen and some things will go wrong. But I think at the end of the day, business, that's a risk that the business has to take. And if they want things to be done, and if they want productivity, something has to be sacrificed. In an ideal world, everyone would be, on air gap devices and no one would have access to anything. And wouldn't that be nice from a security perspective? Then we're out of a job. Like, that's not what we're here for. We're here to facilitate people doing their job safely and securely. And we're there to keep people safe. We're there to keep the company safe. We're not there to just shut people down and say, no, you can't do what you want to do. Because if you stop people from using tools that they want, if you stop people from using platforms that they want, they'll leave and they'll go somewhere else. And, that can't be our fault. We can't not attract top talent because your security team is unreasonable.
Or they'll find a way around it, not because they're trying to be malicious, but because it's a part of their job. And they're like, well, I don't know how to do this, so I'm going to have to do it on my personal computer. Now, all of a sudden, you can't track anything because they're doing it on their 100%. Personal computer. Because
people will find a way to do what they want to do.
Exactly.
Listen, Billy Joel was right. It's a matter of trust. And for those of you who don't know, that's a Billy Joel song. We're going to take a quick break, and we're going to be right back after this word from our sponsors. Hi, if you're hearing my voice, that means you've been listening to or watching 8 Bits with Brandon and PJ. And we're here to talk to you about your product and how it can help you in your life by to do whatever your product does. So if you're an avid listener of the show, or you watch us on Twitch, then you'll know that your product is right for you. That's right. You heard the man in the Hawaiian shirt. We are looking for sponsors. And if you want to advertise on our podcast or live stream, just email us at hello@8bits.tv. And we will respond back to you and talk to you about how that 30 seconds can be your 30 seconds. Quick note, that is Ren and Stimpy background music, and it's totally copyright free, and I love it.
I can't believe that that's copyright free, and I want it on everything now.
I double triple checked it because like it's some of the Ren and Stimpy background music is also like SpongeBob background music, but like not all SpongeBob music is copyright free. But those are just like things from like the 40s that the Ren and Stimpy team found, and we're like, oh, we'll just use this in the background.
I love it. I love it.
Speaking of copyright-free background music, segue. Reg, we've been talking about security. We've been talking about letting the right person in, and we've been talking about switching careers and how skills in the past have come to now. What is a challenge of that switch, and what is something that you felt you had to like overcome that maybe you didn't expect while you were changing?
So I think a big challenge was around trying to get people to, like we were talking about earlier, trying to get people to kind of appreciate those transferable skills. And so a lot of, especially kind of automated screening software kind of looks at my CV and like, right, she's head of marketing, so that's a no. And it was just that I never even kind of got the chance to make my argument. And you know, there's a million things that we can say about the annoyances and the perils of automated screening. But I know from an HR perspective, you know, they can be overwhelmed with applications, and you know, something's got to give. But that was a really big struggle for me, was kind of trying to get people to buy into that idea of, just because I didn't have a traditional background, it didn't mean I couldn't do the job. And self-doubt was a huge thing as well. I have like the idea that I felt like I had so much to learn and so much catching up to do, and I still do. The amount of things that people talk about, the history of cybersecurity, and people who were really big in the scene in the 80s, and like I wasn't born then. Like,
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't know anything about it. And I have this constant battle between kind of trying to feel like I have to catch up on everything, and then just focusing on where I want to go and what I want to do next. And part of it is like, am I missing out on something? What if there's an area that I really would like that I don't know about yet? Part of it, I worry that there's gaps in my knowledge. And so I'm not, so for example, you know, I work for a software company. We have a huge development team. I'm not great with software development because I've never done it before. And so that's a huge gap in my skill set, is the whole DevSecOps thing. It's not something that I've been on this side of before. I've been on either side of before. And so the self-doubt of, maybe I don't know enough to do this, maybe I need to study more. And I spent years studying before I made the leap across. And I still have that now, where I think, you know, I need to learn this, or I need to learn more about this before I'm comfortable doing this project, or before I'm comfortable telling someone what to do. I need to go and read this entire book on networking. And it's just, I think I'll always have that. And part of it's a healthy thing, and I think part of it's good. But it was a huge hurdle before I started applying for jobs. And similar, you said, you know, PJ, that it was this, like, I didn't really think I could do it. It was an interest, but I didn't really know that I could do it. So that was a huge battle as well, I think.
It's so funny because I got my bachelor's, master's, and PhD in computer science. The reason I stayed was because by the time I was done with my bachelor's, I felt like I still didn't know anything. And I was like, I got this opportunity because I was already working with a professor whose research area was in computer science education, to stay. And I was like, great, now I can learn what I don't know, right? And during grad school, I started a company teaching kids how to code. And again, I loved that side of it, right? My whole dissertation was all around how do you enculturate novices, not just teach them semantics. And when I applied for my first full-time job, like that wasn't my own startup, I was told by the recruiter, I don't have the right skill set to be an engineering manager at GitHub. And luckily, I was 8 months pregnant, needing a full-time job, and said, no, you're wrong. I need this. Here's exactly why. Being a PhD student was a skill set that's similar to being an engineering manager. Having this startup, these are the things that I did to, and I had that confidence because I was pregnant. Like, let's be clear. I did not have that confidence in myself. It was like, I need health insurance. I need this job. You're going to give it to me. And luckily she like passed on my resume to the hiring manager, who was like, oh, I definitely see how these skills transfer. But like, I feel you so much, Reg, because I have this more traditional background and like, doctor in front of my name, whatever. I don't know anything. Like, that's literally how I feel. Like, every single time I enter into a room of people, I'm like, I don't know anything about security, like, at all. You could tell me anything and I'm like, whew, Please teach me, because I know nothing. I barely know about web development, right? Because all the things that I worked on were more client-based applications and educational applications. And so, I've been lucky enough to find DevRel, and kind of I can learn anything fairly quickly, but my skill is being able to know enough to help the other person get what they need out of my teaching, right? Like that's where I feel like I have skills. So anyways, all I wanted to say was I feel you, because as someone with that more traditional background, I'm 100% right there with you. There's no way I could possibly know everything in tech. And every single time I consider doing a job switch, I purchase and download a bunch of tech books to my Kindle that I never read.
Yeah.
That's right. It can be such a motivating factor. It can be really good to know where your gaps are. Because first off, knowing where your your skill and knowledge gaps are is such an important part of learning that we don't accurately teach in the education system.
Yep.
We don't teach kids to recognize when they don't know and what the next step is. So recognizing those gaps is huge. Both of you are already like, well, I need to learn. And so you set out to try and learn it. And that's exactly what should be done. So it can be motivating, but it is very, very difficult at the same time in emotional labor. You are constantly having to feel like you should be there. I just learned the other day, people around me had been saying, oh, we're talking about shifting left today. Oh, we got to shift left and make sure we're shifting. And I would just go like, totally left shift for sure, man. And I think I was at an education conference and my manager was talking to someone and said, we're shifting left. We're making security more of a focus at the beginning. And out loud, I went, is that what that means? And she was like, yeah. And then
I have never heard it before. Just saying.
It's brand new, right? And it's like, it's about making security a focus earlier in the development process. Don't build the app, make it work, and then go, and now how do we make it secure? Make security a part of it while you're building, right?
Yeah. That's my philosophy with inclusion on technology.
You do not build the product and then say, and now how do we include others? Nope.
Yeah.
At the beginning. But it's so exciting to have that knowledge of where you're lacking and to be able to use it to get better. But absolutely, it is difficult and it takes labor, real emotional labor to get through that.
Or to decide, I don't need to know this, because we're not all going to know everything in tech. So to decide, you know what, I am good at this part and I can learn that. And I might want to, like you said, Reg, like I might want to explore something because maybe I like it more. But if I decide, you know what, I never need to know how to do that, that's also okay.
Yeah, I have a mentor who I work with, and she has been fantastic for kind of keeping me on track, because every time I speak to her, I'm like, oh, I just got a book on this, or I spent a load of money on a coding course. And she's like, so why are you doing a coding course? I'm like, because I might need to know one day. And she's like, nope, you don't need to know. So, and I hate, like, I'm horrible at coding. I know this is a target audience, but I hate coding.
That's okay.
And I have tried so many times to learn. I have spent a lot of money on boot camps, and I am not a coder. And it's so nice to have someone to kind of bounce that off of and say, look, these are my career goals. This is where I want to go. Do you think this is valuable for me to learn or not? And she's like, nope, drop it. Don't learn that. Learn this instead. And that has been so nice to have, because otherwise I would just like, I've got a million textbooks, which I've probably never even opened half of them, just because I think I need to know them one day.
Yeah. I learned I didn't like to code all day. Like I could not be in a job where I only coded all day, every day. It's just too monotonous for me. Yeah. And I love making stuff. I love writing code, but for very specific purposes. And that's why I love, DevRel in general, because it's like, you can find the motivation behind it, but I'm with you.
Yeah, if I had to actually build real apps, I don't know that I could do it. And that's why I only build Twitter bots over and over and over and over and over again.
To be fair, I do think we could all do it. We could.
Yes.
But I don't think the motivation's there. Like
And I think that's important, right?
yeah. Yeah.
Like why you're doing something is just as important as what you're doing. And if
Yeah.
it's for the money and that's enough to
That's okay.
sustain your motivation, totally fine. Do it for the money. If it's because you're super passionate about building the best Nuxt.js like app, do it. Whatever it is that works for you, your motivation is very important.
Yep.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Reg, you were talking earlier about how like you were like, oh, I was doubting myself and I couldn't get that first step out of marketing into it because there was a lot of like, well, that's not transferable. Once you got there, you found there was a lot transferable and now you're a huge advocate for it. You did point to me, you were like, sort of like you. I feel like I am more likely to be given the benefit of the doubt based on a few things. One, I'm a dude. Like I get an automatic benefit of the doubt. Two, I'm really like loud and like I don't let people not take notice of me. And I think that those things came together. And I think there's opportunities that come my way that don't come everyone's way. And so that's why I always feel strange saying, I could do it, so can you, because I recognize that there's an immense amount of privilege that came my way. Like, yes, there was opportunity and I did work, but like, I don't feel qualified to say things like, oh, I did it and so can you. I'd rather say things like, here's exactly what I did, here's what I know, and I hope this can help. But it's terrible the sort of the way that a lot of women and people of color and minorities in tech have a extra almost target on their shoulders, especially if they're really visible online about it.
Yep.
I'm fairly insulated on Twitter. I follow a lot of people with the same ideas and love and care, but I know that it's a war zone out there. Can you speak to that experience? Or I feel unqualified to speak to that experience, but I felt like I wanted to bring it up, if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. I say very, yes, I'm a woman, so I'm slightly more inconvenienced possibly, but I'm English speaking is my first language. I'm white, I'm straight, I have long, blonde hair, I'm like able bodied. I'm not diverse. Like I am, I'm not that kind of token diversity hire, but for the security industry, I still am. And I'm incredibly fortunate that my network on Twitter, that's how I found my job. So to be very clear, I wasn't offered a job on Twitter. I was sent. So basically, how I kind of made the move is I was head of marketing. So I headed up a department for a big MSP. They restructured and I didn't like the way that they restructured. I thought it was bad for the business. And so I kind of made my argument and said, look, I would do it differently. And they didn't listen to me. So I went, all right, I'm going to go because I don't want to be over a department that is running away I don't agree with. And so I handed my notice in and I started interviewing elsewhere. And I just was like, my heart is not like, I've talked about moving into security for long enough. Everyone hates interviewing. So if I'm going to be interviewing, like, screw it, I'm just going to do it. So I handed my notice in without any job to go to. In the middle of COVID had just started and like, why not? I'll just change careers as well. And so I put something out on Twitter and said, look, I've handed my notice in, I'm looking to move into security. But I'd been active on Twitter for a few years. I had a good network on there. And I had loads of people send me links to, to jobs and stuff like that. And that was part of the reason, as soon as I saw that you were looking, I was like, great, people have done that for me. So of course I will do that as often as I can for the people. But I had a few messages, had a guy message me and said, look, we're hiring for this role. We think you'd be great for it. We're looking, we're open to people from non-traditional backgrounds. We're looking for someone who kind of has additional experience beyond just traditional security. I went through the full interview process. Like it wasn't like, oh, you've been hired because you're a Twitter person. But I had messages from people going, oh, you only got the job because you're a diversity hire. You got the job because you're visible on Twitter and you've taken a job from someone. And the thing is, it is very hard for people to break into security. And there are people who are more qualified than me on paper, and they are looking for jobs and they are struggling to find jobs. And that is absolutely true. But that doesn't mean that I don't deserve the job that I got. I went through the same interview process that everyone else did. I had to sell myself. I had to sell my skills. I had to do the same thing that everyone else did. I do deserve it, but it doesn't mean that other people don't deserve it.
But what does even more qualified on paper mean? Like,
I mean,
because some of the skills that you have aren't probably on paper, and
yeah,
you know, maybe they didn't even get the interview, which is a shame, but we can't have every job interview everyone, right? So it's like, I always like to push back on like what's on paper. That's why I talk about having a PhD, not to rub it in people's faces, but to just be like, that is a thing that's on paper that gives me privilege for sure. But that does not mean that I am more qualified than people for every job or every job in tech or whatever.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you're so right. Like every job has different requirements, and every business is looking for different people. There are some people who, buy the book, and that's look at regulated industries. A bank, they need people who have absolutely no tolerance for any variation on security controls at all. They need someone who has lived and breathed security for their whole lives, and that is all they do. Like that works for them, and they are more qualified than me to have that job. Where I am works for me, and it's a good fit for me. It's a good fit for the business, hopefully. And it was
so far. It seems to be going well for you, to be honest.
Yeah, I love it. And it was one of those things where it was like, I think I'm incredibly, like I said, I was incredibly fortunate to have the network that I do have online. And I try again the group of kind of cross-skilled people that I work with. It's something I try and say to them is it's not the only way to break into the industry. It doesn't mean that because I was active on Twitter, you have to be active on Twitter and that's the way to do it. It doesn't mean that you have to be a LinkedIn thought leader and that's the way to do it. Like different things work for different people. Thank you. It's very different depending. And I know it's very easy for me to say from the comfort of my job and comfort of my home, it's easy for me to say the right thing will come along because other people have more desperate needs than I did at the time. I was in an incredibly fortunate position where I could hand my notice in without something to go to. In the UK, we don't have at-will employment, so we have contracts. So I had a 3-month notice period. I knew I could, even if I freelanced for 3 months, I knew by the end of 3 months, I knew I would land on my feet. But if I had kids, if I had a mortgage to pay, if I had all of these things, there's no way I would have had the confidence to do that. There's no way I would have had the freedom to do that. So what has worked for me definitely isn't going to work for everyone. So yeah, I don't want to say that, because I've done it, like you said, PJ, because I've done it, everyone can do it, but find a way because there is a way. It's just not a cookie cutter approach.
And normally we end the show with asking you to give some advice, but you went ahead and knocked that out of the park without us even asking. Reg, thank you so much for coming on and being a part of this podcast. You are an absolutely amazing person. Dr. Guthels, thank you for jumping in and co-hosting. And
I'm glad I got to chat with you, Reg. And
it was really good. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And we will catch everyone else next time on 8 Bits.